Today, I've prepared two super interesting stories from the Ukraine-Russia war. We're going to look at the cracks forming inside Russia and Putin's long-term grip on power. People used to say that in the 21st century, wars would end in just a few hours with the push of a button. Russia thought they could wrap this up quickly, just like they did with Crimea. But nope, thanks to Ukraine's fierce resistance and Western support, the war has been dragging on for 3 years now. Saying a country goes bankrupt if it loses a war doesn't even begin to cover it. It's total destruction for real. You've got to sell everything you've got, and I mean everything, to fund the war. And that's exactly why Russia's economy keeps going backward. When things don't go as planned, most would cut their losses and think about the future. But Putin's backed himself into a corner where he can't back down. It's turned into a real do-or-die chicken game. So why can't Putin end this war? As you all know, Putin has been leading Russia for a long time. The Russian presidential term is 4 years, and he served as president from 2000 to 2004, then got re-elected and stayed until 2008. Because the Constitution had a 2-term limit, he moved to the prime minister position from 2008 to 2012, then got elected as president again in 2012. From this point, the term changed to 6 years, so he served until 2018, then got re-elected and served until 2024. After 2024, he should have either become prime minister or stepped down, but something interesting happened. Putin attempted a constitutional amendment in 2020, which passed with 78% approval in a public vote. The revised constitution included various things like establishing domestic law's precedence over international law, guaranteeing minimum wage, and blah, blah, blah. But here's the kicker. They added a clause stating that previous presidential terms before this constitutional amendment are counted as zero. This means his previous terms were reset by the amendment, allowing Putin to serve as president again from 2024. What is this? Like those zero-calorie snacks where calories don't count if they taste good. From 2024 to 2030. And if he gets re-elected again, that'll take him to 2036, when he'll be 84 years old. At this point, it's basically a lifetime rule. Who knows? He might even get greedy and find some way to stay in power until he's 90. He'll easily surpass Stalin's 29-year record from the old Soviet Communist Party days. Russia must have anti-Putin factions inside the country, and you'd think they'd grow through checks and balances, but nope. He didn't even try to hide his desire for lifetime rule and straight up changed the constitution. This is something you'd only expect to see in the age of absolute monarchy. That's why people are calling Putin the new czar now. How on earth did this become possible? Early on, Russia's economy wasn't doing great, and it was counted among the poor countries. But from the moment Putin took power in 2000, the GDP started shooting up. The secret to this economic growth? Oil sales. Oil prices went from $30 per barrel in 2000 to $150 in 2008. As oil prices went up, Russia's GDP followed suit, hitting its peak in 2013. But hey, you can't keep riding high on oil sales forever, right? This is where Putin started pushing the slogan about reviving the mighty Soviet Union to strengthen his support base. You see, most Russian people have this nostalgia for the old Soviet Union. Putin used this nostalgia to strengthen his position by stirring up these feelings. This is called the diversionary theory of war, creating a common enemy to strengthen internal unity. Looking at his speech at the 2007 Munich Security Conference, Putin pointed out that NATO broke its promise not to expand eastward and claimed American hegemony was behind it. He spread the idea that America was behind Russia's fall from Soviet power to poverty, and that America was also behind NATO's creeping advance into Russia's backyard. Basically, he created America as a common enemy for all Russians, suggesting that everyone needed to unite their strength to overcome these current difficulties. Remember the feudal system you learned about in high school world history? The feudal system was a decentralized system where the king, lacking the power to control the entire country, gave land to local lords to manage on their own. The king gave away land, and in return, the lords who received it swore loyalty to him. But as these lords collected grain from serfs and raised their own knights, they eventually became too powerful and started challenging the king's authority. And what did the king do then? Start a war. When war breaks out, lords are obligated to gather soldiers from their territories and provide war supplies. If they refuse, they're executed for treason. During war, power concentrates in the king's hands to fight the common enemy, and the lords end up losing all their accumulated wealth and soldiers. Sure, there's the risk of losing your head if you lose the war, but if you win, you get absolute power. Putin's actions are similar to this. He used oil sales to boost GDP and gain absolute support, then highlighted America as an enemy to maintain that momentum. Looking at his approval ratings, they've been quite a roller coaster ride. When Putin first ran for president in 1999, his approval rating was only around 10%. But after successfully crushing Chechnya's independence movement by force, his support shot up to 50% and he won the presidency. In 2008, he resolved the pro-Russian South Ossetia's independence issue in Georgia through military intervention in just 4 days. His approval rating skyrocketed from 70% to over 80%. Then, in 2014, when he took control of Crimea and annexed it through a vote, his ratings soared again. And in 2022, he launched the Ukraine war, entering his 4th peak of popularity. Looking at Putin's historical achievements, Russian citizens felt like they were gradually regaining the glory of the former Soviet Union. And although this Ukraine war isn't over yet, they support Putin because he successfully led the previous 3 conflicts. So they believe he can win this one too. For a leader to monopolize power for such a long time, they need to consistently show results. However, as the Ukraine war started dragging on, various side effects began to appear. From the beginning of the war, Putin used the term military operation instead of war. His logic was that crossing the border was an operation to protect Russian citizens suffering in Ukraine. However, when Ukraine's counterattack intensified, Putin made the decision to mobilize reservists for the first time since World War II. With this, Putin's military operation effectively transformed into a war. For Russian citizens, until now, this military operation felt like something happening far away. After all, the war zone was in Ukraine, not Russia, and it was soldiers doing the fighting, right? But when the mobilization order came down, suddenly everyone became personally involved. They might have to pick up a gun and go to the conflict zone themselves. This triggered a mass exodus of people trying to escape across the border to avoid being drafted. We even heard stories about some people reaching our country by boat. Popular search terms in Russia started including things like how to break your arm to avoid military service. Sounds familiar, right? They even came up with this dark new word, mobilizatsiya, a blend of mobilization and mogila, basically meaning mobilization is death. Next, let's look at the truly shocking event that happened in 2023, Prigozhin's rebellion. Have you heard of the Wagner Group? They're technically a private military company, but they're way too powerful to be called just private. They even achieved greater military successes than the Russian army in the Ukraine war. The head of the Wagner Group was Yevgeny Prigozhin, and surprisingly, this former close ally of Putin actually launched a coup. Prigozhin had achieved great success in the Battle of Bakhmut, but at a terrible cost. The problem was that the Russian regular army didn't provide proper support or even adequate ammunition supplies. They basically failed to take care of the guys who were working their butts off. This is where Prigozhin's anger began. He started criticizing the Russian military leadership more and more openly. The fact that a mere mercenary commander was criticizing national leadership, especially during wartime, made everyone feel that something wasn't quite right. In response to Prigozhin's actions, the Russian leadership ordered all mercenary groups to immediately join the regular Russian army. This meant that the central command wanted to directly control the mercenaries, basically cutting off Prigozhin's arms and legs. He had to choose between 2 options, either back down and survive or stick to his guns. In the end, he chose the latter. On June 23, 2023, Prigozhin led his troops to capture Rostov, the largest military city in southern Russia, and home to the Ukraine War's command center. Putin was absolutely furious. He'd been totally backstabbed. But what was really surprising was the citizens' reaction. While rebel tanks were roaming the streets, people seemed surprisingly unbothered. Street cleaners just kept sweeping next to the tanks, and some soldiers even made heart signs for the cameras. This suggests 2 possibilities. Either Russian citizens have become completely indifferent to their government, or they were so cut off from information that they couldn't grasp the situation. Either way, it was a huge blow to Putin's strongman leadership that he'd maintained for over 20 years. The coup ended with an agreement. The Russian government wouldn't punish Prigozhin and his soldiers if they left for Belarus. Both sides stepped back before blood was shed. After the deal, Prigozhin boarded a plane at Moscow airport, heading to Wagner Group headquarters. But the plane crashed due to something, and Prigozhin died. Since Russia never released the crash investigation results, we don't know why it went down. Maybe he had some red tea, if you know what I mean. In August 2023, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov announced, once President Putin decides to run, no one will be able to compete with him. In other words, our boy Putin's gonna run again, he's gonna win again, so don't even dream about it. The lineup of candidates was interesting too. Opposition figures like Alexei Navalny mysteriously died before the election, and only pro-Putin candidates ran. So basically, the election was just Putin, plus some extras. So, the Russian presidential election was held for 3 days, from March 15th to 17th, 2024. Nobody was really curious about the results. We all knew who'd win before they even started counting. There were lots of interesting incidents at the polling stations. They used transparent ballot boxes, and Russian independent media Serena reported that some polling stations provided special pens with heat-sensitive ink that made the writing disappear. Really showing Russia's class, if you know what I mean. The real question was what percentage of votes he'd get. In Russia, you need at least 66 to 67% support for stable rule, and anything below 65% is considered shaky. During Putin's third-term election in 2012, he got about 64% of the votes. And you could tell from his emotional reaction after the difficult victory that this was meaningful. The Central Election Commission announced that the 2024 election saw a record-breaking, unprecedented turnout of 77.44%, with 87.3% voting for Putin, calling it another historic figure. They even celebrated that it was nearly 20 million more votes than in 2018. Way to go, Putin! For reference, the three pro-Putin prop candidates each got less than 5% of the votes. And get this, our buddy Putin took it a step further and reportedly ordered Russian scientists to research the secret to not aging to achieve his dream of immortality. He demanded quick reports on solutions for all sorts of aging-related issues like cellular aging, osteoporosis, and weakened immunity. He's literally like a modern-day Emperor Qin Shi Huang. Looking at this Russian election, anti-Russian forces strongly criticized it as an unfair election, while pro-Russian forces sent their congratulations. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un congratulated Putin's election victory, saying, "Hand in hand with you, we will meet the demands of our time by creating a new chapter in the DPRK-Russia friendship, which has deep historical roots and traditions. And we will powerfully drive forward the cause of building strong nations, which is the aspiration and desire of both our peoples." Chinese President Xi Jinping said, "Your re-election clearly demonstrates the Russian people's support for you." China and Russia are each other's largest neighboring countries and comprehensive strategic partners in this new era. After securing his fifth term, President Putin announced in his victory speech that he would make Russia one of the world's top 4 economic powers. What an ambitious guy, huh? And now, let's wrap up this video with a quiz for you all. When do you think Russia will become one of the world's top 4 economic powers? 1. Putin 5.0. 2. Putin 6.0. 3. Putin 7.0.
4. Putin Infinity!
That's all for today's video. This series about the Ukraine war will be a 5-part series. Don't miss the other videos. Please like and subscribe to our channel.